shadows dance and dreams take flight through the veil of reality into the night. Rob McConnell leads the way, a beacon so bright. With over 35 years, he ignites the light. A voice from the north where whispers are bold, stories untold in the echoes of old. Fact meets fiction in this realm of delight, in the X-Zone where dark turns to bright. Welcome to the X-Zone, believe and be free, a sanctuary for truth that dare to be seen, where the line between realms gently blurs, in a symphony of voices the mind stirs.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I'm Rob McConnell. My guest of this hour, the second hour of tonight's show, is Art Levine. And we're going to be putting all the links available for Art at www.xzbn.net. And we're coming to you on the CanCom Broadcast Network and, of course, on your hometown radio, Classic 1220 CFAJ AM, right here in Ontario. And from our broadcast center here in St. Catharines, we are able to get right into Toronto, Mississauga, Oakville, Hamilton, throughout the entire Niagara Peninsula, and into the northern tiers of Pennsylvania and the northern tiers of the state of New York. Now, if you'd like to send me an email, it's very simple. www.xzoneradiotv.com is our main website. And if you'd like to listen to all the different shows that we've produced over the years, with our compliments at www.xzbn.net. My email address, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. Art, the first hour we basically talked about anti-Semitism. Is there anything you'd like to say to close that topic off so we can move on to?
Well, it's brief and it's a little far afield, but not for your audience, which is there's been an embrace by neo-Nazis and some UFO believers of mythologies about Nazis under Germany creating flying saucer technology and hiding in Antarctica, and or having bases on the moon, and it served as a feeder. It's taken UFO believers and then got them into the realm where they're taking in neo-Nazi propaganda that's anti-Jewish and talks about how there's even an influencer named Marina Sarin, and Stephen Cambion has examined her work very amusingly and intelligently, and Luis Cayetano, Ufology is Corrupt, has really debunked these ridiculous myths, but they have still a hold. And there's all this talk about Aryan whites and Nordic whites who are alien races. And it's part of this kind of soft intro. They take an existing UFO belief system and then they harden it, and then it gets more extreme. And so one might say it's like, come for the UFOs and stay for the Holocaust denial. And then you have this outrageous individual named Marina Sarin, who's acclaimed. She's a social media influencer and has sported neo-Nazi outfits, claims she's a reincarnated SS general, and you know, in interviews when she was pressed about her beliefs, started to say, oh, that's not true. And then she got angry, kind of like Pam Bondi on the witness stand. She exploded in pure rage and said, Sieg Heil, I'm a National Socialist, and then began blaming, during that and other interviews, YouTube for keeping her off. But then she later developed her own OnlyFans website for UFO young incels. And Stephen Campion's take on her is, nothing says credible top secret alien whistleblower like a custom masturbation video from a girl who talks about the good Nazis. And the good Nazis, in her good Nazis are, she was in space with the good Nazis, and they were trying to prevent the New World Order, but the bad Nazis were back in Germany, but she didn't really have anything to do with it. So it's obviously this confused melange, pulled from different esoteric books, but it still has a hold on a subset of the UFO population and their UFO believer population. Therefore, it's dangerous.
And that would be a great title for a Broadway hit. Night Night Nazi.
Right. Well, you see, I think it has the roots in bigotry, and Jews are outsiders to many people, and therefore, if you dislike them, you want the Holocaust is so self-evident that Holocaust denialism grew up as basically as a vehicle for anti-Semitism, obviously so. But the point of why they've picked that is rather than engaging in, oh, Jews are greedy and have big noses, they took the most horrific thing, that occurred to the Jews and then try to debunk it. And then that's where, this historian, David Irving, ended up losing. And it's in a book and movie about Deborah Lipstadt, the English historian. Mm-hmm. And so they would have these pseudo-intellectual arguments that were promoted, and it's still part of the belief system, even though it's verboten. Now, because of our free speech in America, you can deny the Holocaust and make up complete smears and outrageous comments about Jews, as happened at Amfest, where there was a notorious anti-Semite who was walking around with a sweatshirt that said "Cookie Monsters," aiming to debunk the notion that any Jews were killed in ovens. Couldn't happen. So the issue is, it's not an issue of intelligence. It's any intelligent person can fall for a conspiracy theory if they're in some way predisposed, either by bigotry or and Michael Shermer has a whole book about it, addressing how do intelligent people fall for conspiracy theories. Because there's some data that shows people with graduate degrees may have more belief in QAnon than people without level of college degrees. So it's very, very murky. There's no good explanation, but if you meet someone, the world is such a complicated place, and if you can offer a simple explanation, the Jews did it, and by the way, they lied about the Holocaust, then that's the entree. And that's why the UFO disclosure movement, which is going to get publicized by the new Spielberg movie quite ably, the film fiction, it fits into that, the deep state narrative. They lied to you about UFOs, right? We've had all the alien bases, we've had the bodies, and they've lied about it. This is mainstream politicians. And so it's not that big a jump from they lied about the holding all the alien bodies and UFOs in secret to they're lying about the Holocaust, when Jews control the world. So, if you believe one, you could very well believe the other. People in general don't hold just one conspiracy theory. They hold many. And if you're open to conspiracy thinking, then a variety of conspiracy theories can come your way and you can seize on them.
I don't know about UFO conspiracy theories. There's a lot of people who are spreading more disinformation about them than anything else. We look at Roswell. What happened at Roswell? Well, you've got people who say it was a crashed UFO, and then you've got people who say it was a balloon,
a spy balloon that they couldn't disclose at the time, called Mogul.
That's right. And yet, when you look at the case of Roswell and you really take it step by step, you've got Mark Brazel. He's got this debris all over his ranch. He goes in and he gets a hold of the sheriff. The sheriff calls up the Army Air Force Base. They send out their military intelligence guy, Jesse Marcel. He looks at the debris. He picks some up. And instead of doing the right thing and taking the debris right back to the base, what does he do? He brings it home and lets his wife and kid play with it. Right then and there, that story is dead. So how can people really believe in this crock when there's no
with Roswell,
physical proof?
here's why, because the initial press release that came out of the Air Force was the UFO discovered near Roswell or whatever. Basically, the military itself, and then they retracted it. It might have been Marcel himself who wrote that initial press release.
Right.
And then they retracted it, but it was out there, and then you had, and then your regular guest and often a collaborator, Cal Korff, has written this, what they won't tell, the truth about Roswell, what they won't tell you. He has done the most definitive work showing it. But my point is, see, that if you just believe that Roswell happened or other famous crashes happened, that's a benign belief that is not harmful, except that it might cost the American taxpayer hundreds of millions of dollars over the decades, fruitlessly chasing it. Mm-hmm. But when it morphs into the deep state is covering up, and then it adds to general conspiracy thinking and legitimizes off the front page of the New York Times of this type of conspiracy thinking, then other conspiracies seem more acceptable to the average person who's in their own bubble via the algorithms. That's where you get anti-Semitism exacerbated.
Here's a very interesting statistic. UFO sightings went down and have been down 82.6% since the news coverage of what's been going on in Minnesota.
Oh, yes, that's a very good. Boy, I don't know who did that poll, but yeah, it's probable, because a lot of it would have to do, the news coverage is so much less over UFOs but it got a little bump because Obama 2 days ago said, yes, they're real. And then he walked it back, said, well, they're should be real because they're such, he kind of walked it back. I was not briefed on it. And then, but when this movie hits, Spielberg, one of our great filmmakers, is doing a whole movie about the cover-up. It's called Disclosure Day or whatever it's called. All of these, charlatans and hucksters and mythologies are going to come flooding back.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens. There's no two ways about that. All right, so we've just finished up on anti-Semitism. A great topic, and you did a hell of a good job on your article. Congratulations on
Thank you.
Another great piece of work. When we come back from the other side of this break that's coming up very shortly, I'd like to talk to you about the Epstein files.
Okay.
Or let's call them what they really are. The Trump Epstein files. Like, if he can put his name in front of the Kennedy Center, Trump Kennedy Center, we can do the same thing with the Epstein files, Trump Epstein files. And I'd like to get your take on your secretary. No, not the secretary. She is the... You
mean the AG Pam Bondi?
Yeah.
Yes.
That loudmouth, disrespectful so-and-so. When we come back from this break. I'm Rob McConnell. Art Levine is our guest, and we'll be putting up all the links to Art's articles at www.xzbn.net. Whatever you do, don't go away, because when we come back, more interesting information, more fact. Is it fact? Well, here in the X Zone, fact is fiction and fiction is reality, so don't go away. We'll be right back.
Zone, feel that cosmic flow. Rob McConnell's the captain, guiding us through the glow. Galaxies far and wide, we're on a quest for truth. Cover-ups and whispers, we're digging for the proof. From Roswell secrets to Rendlesham lights, the stories come alive on those mysterious nights. Former insiders, abductees take the stage. Personal encounters, they turn the page. In the X Zone, we're grooving through the stars, searching for answers. We reach for our dreams. Episode, we unravel the extremes.
Just before we went to the break, we started to talk about the Epstein files, or the Trump Epstein files. And it was amazing to hear Hillary Clinton come out strongly suggesting that everyone who is mentioned in the Epstein files should be part of the probe and should be questioned. in an open forum like a congressional hearing. And I'm saying, well, wait a minute, isn't your husband allegedly, and like President Trump and everyone else in the Epstein files, very few have been found guilty or responsible for any actions. But yet, here you've got Hillary Clinton saying, well, you know what? We've got to get it out there. We've got to get them exposed. We have to hold their feet to the fire, basically.
Go ahead, finish.
No, I am finished.
My view is that unlike Trump, who basically, and the entire right wing of the Republican Party said, if you elect us 2024, we're going to open up those Epstein files and we're going to get all those people, in that Democratic cabal. And the implication was they were pandering to the QAnon movement, which had Hillary Clinton herself leading a pedophile ring and drinking blood. And then it was soft pedaled in general, and Epstein proved to be sort of the proof of it. And Donald Trump knew very well how much he was in there. And but my view is, by her coming out like that, she's pretty confident that if there was any legitimate inquiry, which I don't think would happen from this House Republican led by Comer, or in the House Oversight Committee, I don't think there would be, and certainly not for the Justice Department, any real investigation. She must be confident that he did not do anything illegal and just socialized with him. But the scope of it is really shocking, and I urge I have followed it pretty closely, and nobody has covered themselves with glory here at all. I mean, both the entire establishment basically cooperated with him. And if you want to know the full scope of it, and a good overview is relatively short interview is by a contributor to the New York Times named Anand, and it's hard to pronounce, Girdharandis, who was a guest on the Ezra Klein podcast show, talking about the Epstein network, which has been called the Epstein class by Representative O'Connor. And so the notion is that the Epstein class of all these people who, for various, regardless of ideology, so you would have Steve Bannon and Noam Chomsky, who you'd think be on complete opposite ends and are of the political socializing with, trading favors with, maybe getting funding from, Epstein. And this full scope of his network is in an excellent Economist article where they did this dump. The latest tranche was $3 million. So the Economist had been working for 2 weeks using sophisticated software engineers and AI to go through and categorize it. So there's 500 top influentials, not counting staff, who regularly exchanged emails with him. And they break down the categories. Most are in finance, but a number are in, entertainment and media and other fields. And then they even got, now this is just AI, so you'd have to read it yourself. They got the AI to rank the severity of alarm of the emails. So this is pretty extraordinary. And so a sample of the emails where the person, of course, is redacted, who's actually the recipient, says, boy, really appreciated that youngest of the girls. She was great. And then I think it was revealed that one of his guys, was revealed, it might have been one of these Middle Eastern potentates, said, thanks for the torture video. So, the extreme nature of it, there's about 1,500 totally. In other words, those emails right now, if they were all unredacted, you could go to court and legally prosecute them. But the Trump administration under Bondi is not investigating anybody. And when she pulled her hissy fit, she pulled so many hissy fits during her testimony, Pam Bondi.
Yeah.
But one of them was when one of the congressmen said, we were in there, and in 45 minutes, we found out one of the unredacted, named as a co-conspirator, and uh, I forget which billionaire it was at the moment, but in any case, uh, she said, "Well, he was his name was in hundreds of other emails." Yes, but he followed back saying, "Yeah, but in the co-conspirator section, his name was redacted." Literally, what was in the original federal indictment that was ignored by the then U.S. attorney in 2005 and 2006, Alex Acosta, later became the labor secretary. The co-conspirators named included this guy, and that was the one that was covered up. And so they're refusing, and they're refusing to look. And when it comes to sexual abuse, there's often a very long lead time, particularly at the state level. Many states have made remove statute of limitations. There's always been a removal of statute of limitations for murder, but now many states have removed it for sexual abuse. And I believe, using either state charges that could be referred to local prosecutors or the federal government, there's probably dozens of people, based on the evidence they now have, that they prosecute. They're not investigating them. They're not investigating the killers of Renee Good. They're not investigating the killers of Alex Preddy. Who are they investigating? The widow of Renee Good, because she had been an activist. I mean, that's how crazy it all is. But I think the important thing about the Epstein files, and that's why I recommended this interview with Anand on the Ezra Klein, but also the Economist review, worth signing up for a free view, one time only free view of it. And then some of the Substack writers like Ellie Leonard, who is, gone from just being a citizen reviewer to like being the number 2 political report writer on Substack because of she's created a community of researchers around the entire Epstein files. And then there's also, for those of you who may be interested personally and want to look into it, there's actually something that was put together called Jmail, which is the equivalent of Gmail, but all on the Epstein files, and is a searchable thing where you can type in the name of someone and see all their emails and their communications. But Ellie Leonard's thing is called Panic Writer, and then there's other people who are covering it regularly on Substack, more regularly than most of the mainstream media. And that's Lev Parnaz, Zev Shalev, Ellie, Left Hook with Wajad Ali, Daniel Moody, and Damn Digest. I'm just mentioning these different places because they're covering, but the person who knows the most on this historically has her own Substack and publishes the Miami Herald. And her name is Julie K. Brown. If it wasn't for Julie K. Brown, this entire issue would not have occurred. So what happened is she had inkling. She was in Miami, a superb investigative reporter, and she learned about the Sweetheart deal, where there was a 60-count indictment with named co-conspirators, and Alex Acosta and the local sheriff in, West Palm Springs, whatever, agreed to cut this crazy deal where he just pled to one state charge. Epstein, this is in between 2006 and 2008, pled to one state charge for soliciting prostitution from a minor, and had basically a staycation with a monitor where he could leave his jail every 6 days a week and go home and rape girls. And all of this was exposed by Julie K. Brown. She got into, and that's how we got to the second federal indictment, where even though there'd been a gag order, I mean, this Sweetheart deal is so corrupt, and that you hear the term Sweetheart deal, but when you look at the details of it, a gag order to never prosecute anyone ever affiliated and never reveal the names of anyone ever affiliated with him. No further prosecutions of him or anybody else who was affiliated with him ever. That's in a federal deal. That's almost never happened before. Now, and he pled to just a state charge, free to rape people for the next 12 years or so. Okay. Then Julie K. Brown comes out with her story about the sweetheart deal after Acosta's the labor secretary, which I think was a reward by Trump. Mm-hmm. Thanks for keeping the lid on it, buddy. Here's your cabinet secretary position. But the scandal blew up, and then Acosta had to leave. But in the run up to 2024, after Epstein was killed in 2019, okay, let's say officially it's suicide. He died in 2019 under suspicious circumstances where this quadrifecta of accidents, the guards are asleep, the cameras are missing. And now under the new Epstein file release, they even show that some FBI agents or other federal officials got the actual canister out of the camera. That's in the latest trend. So it's extremely suspicious. And so as part of their campaign for 2024, Kash Patel, Bonvino, these leaders of the FBI, all saying, we want to get to the bottom of it. We're going to release the Epstein files. And that's what helped. It was one of the things, not obviously the only thing, that helped propel him back into the White House, because it fed the MAGA belief. Because now it turns out, and there's a comedian, very entertaining, Josh Johnson, we're seeing on his YouTube page, talks about, given the cabal that actually has been shown to be existing of billionaires engaged in child rape across the globe in content, and being accessories to and apologists for, he feels like he needs to go to his conspiracy-minded friends and apologize.
We've got to take our final break here, I believe. Is this our final break, Craig? Yeah, he says this is our final break. Wow, time's gone fast. Exonation, what can I say? Our guest is Art Levine. We're going to have all his links available for you later on this evening at www.xzbn.net. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Don't go away.
Is there life out there? With each episode, we unravel the extremes. Area 51, where the secrets run deep. Alien implants that make you lose sleep. Astrophysicists and researchers unite, pushing the limits, reaching new heights. Each twist and turn reveals something more. The silence of the night, where shadows softly play. A voice emerges gently, guiding minds astray. Rob McConnell calls to us from a realm unseen. The X Zone beckons softly, where dreams blend with the keen. With lies, he crafts a tapestry of stories beneath an endless sky. In over 35 years of tales that twist and turn, each word a flicker sparking fires, igniting hearts that yearn. Dare to believe he softly pleads in this place divine, where fact is just a mirror and reality unwind.
Can I talk to you? I want to give a brief plug to my TWATNews article.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. Art Levine is our guest. And what were you saying, Art?
Yeah, I want to mention the way to understand the Epstein is the worst, both pedophile scandal of modern history in terms of one individual. And this cover-up going on now is significantly worse and more wide-ranging, given the crimes being covered up, than Watergate or anything else in modern political history. But the thing to understand is the pedophilia scandals are so widespread in our institutions that we have these institutional structures that allow and enable it. And I did an investigative piece about it for an excellent publication on mental health and addiction treatment reform called mindsitenews.org. And it was about lawsuits rocking the troubled teen industry. And those are kids who are emotionally troubled And because their parents can't handle them, or they're in trouble with the welfare system, or they're in the welfare system, they get sent to these essentially out of control facilities. And in one hospital in called Hartgrove, these are the allegations. So everything I say is an allegation in a lawsuit, not yet proven, except some were others against UHS, Universal Health Service, had hundreds of victims. So we're talking hundreds of victims in one mental health facility for kids who are already emotionally disturbed. That's nearly the amount of people in the Archdiocese of Boston alone. And they basically didn't vet people, and they had repeat offenders, and they just arrested, they just arrested one person who had been sexually abusing kids there for about an 8-year stretch, who was a mental health counselor. But according to the testimony and in lawsuits, one of these victims, they had bogus therapy where you had mental health counselors have kids have sex with each other and or perform oral sex acts on the male therapist and claim it's for their free expression. This had went on. And the point that the judge in another case, where 2 other cases involving Universal Health Service, where 2 separate juries, the totals of one involved a 16-year-old, a 13-year-old girl raped by a 16-year-old patient, willfully, everything ignored, and she was put in a co-ed dorm and raped, is a lot. And the view of that judge in that case, which was about a $500 million verdict, okay? Wow. And then another case, nearly over $300 million. So nearly $1 billion in verdicts against 2 facilities by juries. And the view of some of the judges and the attorneys were this could happen right now again, because the Universal Health Services has barely acknowledged this happening in their facilities, let alone medical neglect deaths that I've referenced in earlier articles from TWATNews about what Senator Ron Wyden has called taxpayer-funded child abuse. So now, what I learned in my reporting on that is how systemic it is. So where there's been some light of change, although most people don't know it, is the Boy Scouts of America were so scandal scarred, and they had as many as 80,000 victims. 80,000 victims. They went bankrupt, and as part of the bankrupt settlement, they had to issue these reforms guided by a court, forced down their throat, and guided by scholars and experts on preventing child abuse. So right now, literally, it's not a 100% guarantee. No individual Boy Scout official can ever interact by himself by phone or in person or text or web with any Boy Scout forever. That's how serious it is. And they had all these rules imposed because the system was so broken. And obviously they improved the vetting. And here's a shocking fact I picked up. The so-called vetting is, was the person arrested and convicted for child predators? When they actually look at first-time arrested child predators, okay, who are arrested, over 90% of them have never been in trouble with the law for anything having to do with sexual abuse. So looking at criminal records is useless. And the Boy Scouts were forced to change, but the Catholic Church has made significant inroads, but I haven't done that level of change. And none of these mental health facilities, of which there have been thousands of cases nationally of sexual abuse, let alone medical neglect and death. So over the decades, there's been at least 400 credible deaths in youth treatment facilities alone, not counting juvenile detention facilities where hundreds of kids were killed at the Dozier School in Florida. So I'm just saying that we have a system that where all of the institutions that exist are allowing it to flourish. And I saw a really good economic based analysis is you would not have the level of child abuse that Epstein was able to do and others if you didn't have the massive income inequality where you have 100 people in America owning more than the bottom third of the entire country. So if you have so many people who are getting by paycheck to paycheck and you have multi-billionaires running everything, buying up the media, controlling, kowtowing to Trump. So you look at it from the bottom up and you look at the young teenage girls who are impoverished because Ghislaine Maxwell would look for people who are vulnerable or poor or troubled or estranged from their family and recruit them. Now,
in fact, there are two great Netflix shows. One is on Epstein and one is on Maxwell. And if you go to Netflix and in the search engine, just put in Epstein or Maxwell, the shows are there. I watched them over the weekend. They're fantastic. They connect a lot of dots, and that's on Netflix. Listen, it really upsets me to know that your government in the United States right now is so corrupt, and the rest of the world is looking at the United States now and saying, screw you.
Yeah, well, they're sort of doing it, and NATO in Europe is kind of trying to figure out how do we defend ourselves. I thought it was promising. First of all, your prime minister's speech, at a big, was it NATO or was it a European Union event?
It was at Davos
It was at Davos, right?
Yeah.
Gave a very eloquent talking about the threats to the world, the world that we once knew that's now falling apart. And the fact that NATO countries had to send added troops to Greenland over the fear of a possible invasion of Greenland. Now, a theoretical question without debating the Russiagate and what Trump calls the Russia hoax. If Trump was at least a useful idiot for the Russians, if not direct agent, would he be acting any differently than he has in the last decade? I don't think so.
No.
It's hard to tell. I mean, and then I urge you to read the books by Craig Unger and Michael Isikoff and David Korn. Craig Unger did, this amazing, he's done 2 series of books about the Russian influence. And his last one, he has an on-the-record KGB agent explaining precisely how, with no direct bribes, but cultivated and manipulated Trump, including, he was a real estate dealer in the 1980s. He ran a full-page ad about the SALT Treaty and missile weapons that was drafted for him. You think Donald Trump, trying to buy the Plaza Hotel in the 80s, knew or cared about weapons and ICBMs and how to have a peace deal over weapons? No. So out of nowhere comes this full-page ad he paid for. But more than that, the second of the books talks about the Trump, this agent. Earlier book talks about the influence. The other person to follow, I really urge you, if you're interested about corruption and Russian influence, the woman who knows more than anybody in the world on this is named Olga Lautman. And she has 5 Substacks. One of them is called the Trump Tyranny Tracker, where if you want to catch up what terrible stuff has happened the last few days, she's got it. Then she has Unmasking Russia. And she was the researcher for both Craig Unger and Michael Isikoff, formerly of Newsweek, and David Korn, the bureau chief. The Korn and Isikoff collaborate. So she knows it all, and she does these free kind of history lessons about Russian influence. Now, a lot of people, even on the left, don't like it, but it's important to understand that the level of corruption right now, whether or not it's directly or indirectly influenced, is Trump is trying to build for himself what Putin did in Russia, which is an oligarch-friendly, authoritarian democracy or a liberal democracy with the shadow appearance of democracy. Because you remember, they still have elections in Russia. They have elections. and they have some kind of media.
Speaking about elections, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think there's going to be midterm elections, or is Trump going to somehow get away with blocking the elections so that the Republicans remain in power?
I think the elections will happen, but unless state and local officials in purple states, meaning Democrat and
Yeah,
Republican, or Democratic states, uh, take really aggressive action to have, a game plan, we could find these very compromised things. So, not known very much to Canadians, but the Trump administration is trying to grab all of the voter rolls so they could, quote in Trump's term, nationalize the elections and then go through and look for people with Hispanic names and then claim that they're not entitled to
exactly.
vote.
You and I have to take our final break. I made a mistake. My producer told me that this coming segment is our final segment, so please stand by. Exonation, if you'd like to find out more about our guest this hour, Art Levine, who's a contributor to the Washington Spectator. We're going to put all the links at www.xzbn.net. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. And for all of the shows that we produce here at the X-Zone and Relmar, we have them up on xzbn.net, the whole show with our compliments. Go visit the site. You'll have a great time. Get yourself a cup of coffee and be prepared to spend hours. Art Levine and I return as we wrap up this hour here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, and you're listening to us on the CanCom Broadcast Network.
Where the river meets the haunted lake, and the fog rolls in before daybreak. Cannons rust and ghosts still bleed in the shadow of the maple trees. Drums of war still beat below.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the final segment of tonight's show. At this time, I'd like to thank Art for coming on the show tonight for 2 hours. Art, always great having you with us.
Thank you.
I'd also like to thank my studio producer, Craig Webb, on the other side of the glass here. Craig West. I'm sorry. Craig Webb is our dream guy over here. And, of course, my senior executive producer, my beautiful wife, Laura Rogers. If you'd like to send us an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, and on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. And as I've been saying, we will be putting all the links for Art Levine, as well as where you can watch the rerun of this show, where you can listen to the radio show at www.xzbn.net. Art, it seems that the United States is going to hell in a handbasket. It seems that the rich are getting richer, and mom, dad, and the 6 kids can't get enough to eat. The unemployment situation is awful. Jobs are hard to find. All these new industries that Trump is saying are just pouring into the States can't be found. Yeah, he's making money on tariffs, which we call blackmail. And yet you see him on TV and he looks and sounds as if he's so friggin' wonderful. Does he live in a world of reality? Does he take his meds? And I wouldn't want to be the Secret Service people who have to change his diaper.
Well, my feeling is he's a malignant narcissist and a sociopath. Mm-hmm. And so whatever he believes, he does come to believe. And by the way, I just want to mention quickly, if you want to keep up on anti-Semitism and right-wing extremism, 2 of the best chronicles are Ben Lorber of Political Research Associates. His Twitter handle is BenLorber8. And then Will Sommer of The Bulwark. popular magazine and his newsletter, False Flag, and he's Will Sommer. And if you read them, you'll know all the craziness that's going on. But in terms of Trump, I think that if you say a lie, you got to remember that after his first term, he's chronicled as making 31,000 lies by the Washington Post. And the media was reluctant to even call them lies. So let's call them falsehoods. So I think that if you're that much of a narcissist, you convince yourself that, that it's true. But also, I think he is fundamentally defective as a human being. When he asked his general, what did these suckers die for, when he's at the graveyards of soldiers in Europe? I mean, the lack of sensitivity or empathy for other human beings is just widespread. And there's a fancy term I don't remember. It has a word like hecatocracy, when the worst person in a country is the most powerful leader in the country. It's hard to find, I'm sorry to say, a worse person, but he is an effective demagogue. But his failures are becoming so evident now that his support is fading a bit, but over 80% of Republicans still support him right now. That's important to understand.
It's crazy to see what he's doing and getting away with. I was reading articles earlier today where people around the world who are mentioned in the Epstein files, or the Trump Epstein files, are losing their jobs. They're getting prosecuted. Everybody around the world, except within the United States.
Yeah, and what they did was none of them were directly accused of committing sex crimes.
Right, they were just mentioned.
Right, they're just mentioned in it or met with him. Trump, now, if you want to know the reality about why, there is buried in the Epstein files, and people like Ellie Leonard and others, and Julie K. Brown and others have looked at, there are even allegations in the current where someone there was a reference to an accusation of rape of a teenage girl that's different than another allegation that was in a lawsuit that was withdrawn in 2016. Now, the reason is he is in charge of the government, and he's having this, stranglehold on information, and we only have a subset, and most of what we do have has been redacted. So it's basically a full-scale cover-up that they're getting less and less trying to explain away, or they change the subject, like Pam Bondi did, screaming about the Dow. And the reason that I think they're acting so outrageously is they feel, and they are going to try to make it impossible to vote them out of office and vote the House out of office. Whether they succeed or not, you would not have, in a normal administration, Pam Bondi insulting everything, refusing to ask questions, and when asked, why aren't you indicting any of the other co-conspirators, launching into a tirade about how great the Dow is, if you thought that could be bad politically for you, Pam Bondi, or your boss, Trump. It may be bad politically, but they're not worried about the consequences. And I think not worried about the consequences applies to the entire Epstein files. It applies to UHS, which is only facing, monetary penalties that they can easily afford and later get reduced. That with no accountability, no consequences is built into the culture of United States across so many institutions and law firms, where there's one rule for the very rich and another rules for everybody else. And that's the world we're stuck in. And our last remaining hope will be to have some kind of reasonably fair election in 2026. And my hope is the odds are better than not that will happen, but there's no guarantee unless the people rise up, make sure they're registered, make sure they have all the ID they need. And that's the other thing. This act that just passed the House, called the SAVE Act, to prevent voter fraud, even this is shocking to know. My driver's license in my city would not allow me to register to vote because of all the 50 states and the District of Columbia, only 5 driver's licenses that are issued under the Real ID program that was supposed to make it verifiable are proof of citizenship. And those are only generally for northern states where they travel into Canada. So most Americans don't have it. And then we have 69 million women whose names are their husband names.
Right.
According to Jennifer Cohen and the Brennan Center, of those 69 million, even if you have a marriage certificate showing you were married under your husband's name and a birth certificate showing your birth name, that may not be sufficient to prove that you're an American citizen. You need to get a passport, and half of Americans don't have passports. And so they're getting, this is a fever dream for Republicans. Now, it's probably not going to pass the Senate, but I foresee that Trump is going to try to withdraw federal funding or otherwise threaten states that don't comply with implementing these draconian measures that are really designed for vote suppression. So it's up in the air. The odds are better than not that we're going to have honest elections in 2026. If we don't, the ball game is really over. Because then 2028 gets much harder to have a fair election if you've managed to keep the House in Republican hands, because every signal when they haven't done vote suppression, including there was a 35-point swing in a state legislative district in Texas that went strong, that was a pro-Trump district on a state legislator, and then the Democrat won. In a 70% Trump district, a Democrat won. Now, how would that be possible unless there's a lot of revulsion, even, among average people, including some Republicans? So it's a close call here.
Do you think he's going to try and run again in 2028?
I don't think he will, because it's too easily knocked down. Even this compliant Supreme Court would not allow it. But he's going to threaten it. And what will be very interesting is he's going to keep the media off balance. He's a brilliant at distraction. So he'll keep the media off balance, and, he'll allow the speculation to continue. I don't see the Republican Party being willing to violate so openly Constitution, particularly when the Supreme Court is not going to allow a third run. But of course, this is this Supreme Court, which literally declared any action by the President of the United States, including murder of opponents, is legal if done as an official act. I may be exaggerating the import, but there's that decision where the president, if something is done in a political official act, can't be prosecuted for a crime. Now, then you could, in theory say, well, it wasn't really an official act. It was a political act.
Right.
He went into the headquarters and had his black shirts put a gun to the head of a political opponent. They go, well, that's not an official act. So you can be prosecuted, but it's not a certainty. And there's a Republican judge and other Republicans and judicial experts who are Republican leaning. The Supreme Court went way over any previous precedent by declaring that a president acting under official cover of law can never be prosecuted for any crime while in office or afterwards. I mean, that gives him a lot of leeway.
It certainly does. We've got about a minute left in tonight's show. As always, Art, I thank you so much for coming on. But if you can, in a very short 30 seconds, what do you think is going to happen to Cuba?
I don't think they're going to invade Cuba, but there'll be a lot of pressure on them. And, whatever Rubio wants is going to happen, because he claims from Cuba and he has hungering for greater Russian influence. I mean, American influence. Could be right.
A Freudian slip there?
Freudian slip, right.
Yeah. I didn't know Freud wore slips, but you never know these days. Well, apparently J. Edgar Hoover wore funny outfits as well. Hey, listen, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. It's been a great honor and pleasure having you with us.
Thank you for hosting me.
I wish you have continued success. And you and I were talking about getting you on at least once a month, and this just goes to prove that it'll be a great asset to the listeners and the viewers here. Take care of yourself, my friend. Be safe and stay out of trouble.
Thank you.
All right. That's it for tonight. I'll be back tomorrow night at 10 o'clock as once again we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., 10 p.m. to midnight. From everyone here at the X Zone and the CanCom Broadcast Network, good night, everyone.